Now today we are going to observe the ginger in his natural habitat. He is currently flicking his Medford Fighter Flipper 200 times in order to satisfy any of the trolls or any of the possible naysayers in the comment section. Now, you never really know what's going to happen with a ginger. We naturally have no souls. Oh, did I say we? I did mean him. He naturally has no soul, so he tends to spaz the fuck out for no apparent reasons. But that is in some ways the inherent appeal of the ginger. Also, this is supposed to sound kind of like a Australian Steve Irwin, but I think I'm channeling more Donald Trump vibes, and I'm not entirely okay with that. Now, supposedly this knife has a substantial break-in period, but the ginger's been carrying this knife for about a year. He's flipped it open over and over and over again, hundreds, possibly thousands of times, and it still does not deploy on command. So again, we're going to give this Medford Fighter Flipper 200 chances to redeem itself. Will it redeem itself? Will it fail? Only time will tell. Now watch as the ginger spazzes the fuck out. Fun fact, that was actually Slipknot slowed down to prevent copyright infringement, and it kind of sounded like the band Mortician or similar death metal offerings. Now at this point in time, we're about 150 flips in without one successful deployment. Now folks, I have found knives that are substantially cheaper than this that have deployed on time every time. So Mr. Medford, what the hell is your excuse, sir? Now, I am Donald J. Trump, and Mr. Medford, you better make a better knife next time, because this is just shameful. Fun fact, that was also Slipknot, just rapidly sped up. Now, on to your regular scheduled broadcast. Oh look, this idiot forgot to turn off the camera. Ha ha ha. Now, if you are interested in the durability of this knife, I'm going to link my buddy Dirk Wierning's video to where he absolutely smashes this knife, goes through all sorts of crazy ass testings. I'm not going to do that, simply put, because I cannot do a better job of representing this knife any better than he did. So rather than trying to do some half-assed attempt or copycat thing, go ahead and check out his video. He does a fantastic job of it. Now, the good about this knife, I really and genuinely do enjoy the aesthetics of this piece. This is really kind of stacked leather, but it's in fact stacked titanium. How the breaker wraps around everything else. It's a really overall interesting knife, and I really do enjoy the looks. That being said, a knife isn't about look, it's about performance, it's about action, it's about a whole bunch of different things. And then a knife at close to $1,000 price tag, it should be about a whole lot more. Now, as far as overall ergonomics for using an actual work, I rated the ergonomics on this knife pretty high. To be very clear, that's before I had really used it, man. Once I really start to use this knife and I really start to bear down on it, this entire thing is one giant ass hotspot. Now, to be clear, if you use this knife with gloves, which I almost feel like you're supposed to use this knife with gloves, that's not really so much of an issue. But if you are using this thing barehanded and you're really choking down on it and trying to go to work, again, I've only been holding it for about 35 seconds, and you can see I have little bits of tear on my skin. Everything is red. You can see where the actual hot spots sit, bits of raised pieces on my hand. The ergonomics are horrible. To be clear, they're not the worst I've ever felt, so ergonomic-wise, I'm going to give this knife, as far as a long-term piece, a 3. Not good, not the worst either, but definitely not good. Alright folks, I'm back to defend, well, not the honor, because he has no honor, but to defend the reputation of Mr. Greg Medford. Now, this idiot spends about 2.5 minutes trying to cut this piece of paper, but this idiot did not realize that he used this knife to the point where it was completely and utterly dull. So now I do assure you folks, when this knife comes to you fresh from the factory, it will cut. It is not the best paper cutter per se, but it is definitely designed for cardboard and definitely designed to work. Now this jackass said the opposite in this video, but we're going to go ahead and cut all of that out, and I'm going to let you know the truth. Mr. President, signing out. Now, this knife is very much designed for hard use, to go through things like cardboard and plastics and everything else, and for that, it definitely does work. I do have to say that the edge geometry, even straight from the factory, is sort of mediocre when it comes to anything involving a fine task, but as far as just a general working piece, it is definitely functional, and it's also really fun to use. But with all that being said, because of the thicker profile, this is definitely not what I'd ever consider to be a slicey knife. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's not really designed to be that, but this thing is definitely not, as the EDC crowd would put it, slicey at all. Now, first off, the Fighter Flipper has the ball bearing pocket clip, which is primarily on big knives, for example. And when this piece is done right, it slides in the pocket absolutely perfectly, has great retention, slides out perfectly, there's no problems. On the Fighter Flipper, this is not done right. To be clear, it's not the worst I've ever seen, but it is not as functional as it should be. It's not quite a pocket shredder, but it is very, very close, and it's not the most enjoyable to take in and out of the pocket. Now, because of that, I would rate the overall carryability as well as how it fits in the pocket, carries in the pocket, and swings in the pocket as a 4. Again, not the worst, not the best. Now, as far as the actual lockup, now you've seen me do some spine whack tests on knives that absolutely performed. This does not. Now, to be clear, you're not going to very oftentimes be having to spine whack your knife, but if you need to, this is not the one to do it with. Now, as you can see, the Fighter Flipper has a very, very early lockup. Now, sometimes that's okay with knives. Sometimes they're completely functional. But this one, as you can see, definitely does not lock up the greatest. Let me be very clear, it has not failed on me yet. So that's definitely a positive. But with all that being said, man, again, when you're dealing with a knife of this price point, it really is unacceptable, especially if it's being built as a hard-to-use tactical folder and it cannot stand up to even these basic tests. Again, spine wax don't prove all that much, but they definitely do prove durability, and for that one, this is lagging. Furthermore, this gigantic flipper tab only really serves one purpose, and that purpose is to basically prevent you from cutting off your hands if that shitty lock bar happens to fail. Because again, as far as an actual flipper tab, even though flipper is in its name, it does not perform at all. It is not a functional flipper. Now, this knife from the factory did not have lock stick. Over time, it has developed it though. It's by no means bad. You can definitely disengage, but there is a little bit of resistance and it's weird sort of like squishy noise. It kind of sounds like a bed spring. So that's definitely a downside, but to be very clear, this might just be mine, but the ones I've handled on top of this have also had similar things over long-term use. So that could be a problem with the factory, could be just a couple of very interesting coincidences, but either way, the lock was almost perfect from the factory, and over use, it has definitely developed a noticeable bit of stick, though no actual play. On a positive note, this PVD though on the blade as well as the breaker and hardware has handled and held up absolutely perfectly through everything that I have put through this knife through. As you can see, it doesn't even look used. It's really kind of crazy how durable Medford PVD coating is, and that is definitely a positive, but unfortunately it's one of the few in this overall long-term review. Now, as far as Medford goes, this is definitely not the biggest Medford of all time, but it's definitely a pretty fat knife. And here's a nice comparison between the full-size 0.26-inch Marauder as well as the Praetorian full-size tie. Now, as you can see here, in comparison to the other two Medfords on the table, this knife is not quite as fat as the Praetorian tie. It's more akin to the full-size Marauder. Definitely a bigger knife, but not the biggest by any means. The Praetorian tie is still the fat daddy on that one. Pun intended if you happen to be a fan of Medford knives. And the actual blade stock itself does follow that pattern pretty perfectly. Also, in case you're wondering, like most Medford knives, for whatever reason the lock bar does raise above the scale, which is not only visually ugly, is very unfunctional, and could definitely equal some pretty bad problems if you ever happen to drop this knife on the actual lock face itself right here. You might mar it and be able to dramatically affect your lockup, which is, you know, not good. Anyways, here it is against the Heretic Auto Butcher as well as the Chipikov Knives Bear. Also, before I forget, here is a size comparison among some of the staples of the EDC industry. You guessed it, here are a few more because why not? Alright, so I wanted you to see my face when I said this. I gave this knife a very positive review previously, and to be clear, I really did feel that way. That being said, I cannot share the same sentiment, and I am very sorry if I accidentally, because it really was an accident, misled you. The Medford knife and tool Fighter Flipper is going to get a 4 out of 10. This knife, even though I personally like it, has some very big form over function issues. Now, if you have to open this knife, there you go. A little bit of wrist, and it does deploy, but you shouldn't have to do all that. On top of that, it makes this knife scary. Now, if you happen to be in a banquet, you know, say, hey, I'm gonna go cut a piece of cake or whatever. Now, flipping open a knife, scary enough. Going, ha! Is fucking terrifying to the sheeples of the world. So basically, this knife should go back to the drawing board. And Mr. Medford, I'm sorry, man. First off, you're a jackass. I don't really like you, but I like your knives. But this should go back to the drawing board, and you should never, ever make a flipper knife that does not flip. The words flipper are literally in the title. It doesn't flip. It's like a dolphin with erectile dysfunction. Like, it doesn't flip. Flipper is sad. So again, 4 out of 10. I'm genuinely sorry for misleading you guys. It wasn't my intention, but this knife over time does not hold up. Out of the box, I loved it. Over time, kind of shitty. But as always, folks, I love you all from the bottom of my little ginger heart, wherever the hell the heart's at, this whole area loves you. I hope you have a fantastic day, morning, noon, or night, whatever you are doing, have a fantastic one. I love you all. Take care, and bye-bye. Also, that was like a dap, like a boop, fist dap. Anyways, have a good day.